Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Adeel Akhtar, an actor you'll have seen in everything from the first season of Stranger Things, Four Lions, and The Dictator to The Big Sick, Enola, Holmes, Killing Eve, and Sweet Tooth. He co-stars with Clare Rushbrook in Clio Barnard's midlife romance Ali and Ava, which screened last year at TIFF and opens across Canada this Friday, July 29th. In Toronto, it's playing at the TIFF Bell Lightbox. It's a harshly beautiful, strikingly tender film, like all of Clio's work, and Adeel is wonderful in it. You should go see it. Adeel picked Bhaji on the Beach, Gurinder Chadha's 1993 film about a busload of Blackpool women, most of them of South Asian extraction, confronting generational and cultural differences on a day trip to the seaside, as well as the ingrained prejudices within and without their own community. Produced for English television but released theatrically overseas, this is one of the first British films to center South Asian characters, played by an expansive cast including Zora Segal, Shaheen Khan, Sarita Kajuria, Suada Del Fares, and more, and let them tell their own story. As you'll see, that choice meant the world to some of the people in the audience. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I first saw it on TV in the UK, and it was at a time when there wasn't a lot of British Asian films that were being made. And the ones that were being made, you could say, were pretty sort of run-of-the-mill and obvious in the sort of themes that they had. But there was a couple I remember seeing. It was Bhaji on the Beach, which is Gurinder Chadha's early stuff. Mm. And then there was also Hanif Qureshi's sort of his early stuff. My Beautiful Laundrette, Buddha Suburbia was, but I remember it being in that category of film where the characterization of these women, which is essentially they were just going on a trip to the beach, and it was a generational thing. So you had the sort of older ayah, so the grandma, and then you had the young sort of British Asian. So you went through like first, second generation of British Asians, and all women. And the conversations they were having were sort of that sort of intersection between cultural sort of pressures that were brought from the older women in the group, stuff that, you know, looking down on the younger women in the group, saying that they weren't Indian enough, and then the younger women looking at the older women in the group saying, well, you know, we're doing the best we can here. And the fact that, you know, we're trying to, just do the. But anyway, I just remember seeing that and that sort of resonating quite a bit for maybe my experience at the time, which was just working out the kind of this sort of post-colonial world that we were living in the UK, just working out, well, where do you get your what is the authority here? You know, what's the guiding force that's going to help you work out these problems of culture and society and tradition and religion and all that sort of stuff. And just to see some brown faces on TV at that time was super exciting, you know. So
the representation is always the core of everything on this podcast. Basically, everyone who sees a movie that makes them feel seen loves that movie forever. Yes. Especially if you catch it at an impressionable age. And I was looking back over the history of it because, remarkably, it's 30 years next year that this film was made. It aired on Channel 4. I remember seeing it in Toronto theatrically. It was released.
Oh, you did? Oh, cool. Oh, no.
Yeah. And the fact that it opens with a Punjabi version of Summer Holiday is charming. I didn't realize that Chadha had written those lyrics, that it was a new recording.
I didn't know. Right. I didn't know that. Right.
Yeah, I thought she just found a cover, but she actually had to commission it.
That's so wonderful. Yeah. Oh, good to know. And that's sort of like Summer Holiday was always coming on every year on TV in the UK anyway. So we had that sort of So that, yeah, and so to have that and have that juxtaposed with like something that's familiar sounding, but something that's new as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what she's very good at doing. I mean, she's not sort of like inhabiting that sort of. I think she's refusing to inhabit that kind of British art house kind of space. She's sort of going. She wants stuff to be sort of entertaining as well as insightful and as well as moving. You know, we had that sort of like wave of British films which were like that full, like the Four Weddings and the Funeral and the Full Monty, and it was like. It was sort of showing a bit of an insight into British culture, but ultimately it was entertaining as well. And that's where Gurinder, I think, is like, that's where she sort of positions herself, which is really refreshing, because why not? You know, there doesn't, just because you've got characters that have British Asians in it, doesn't necessarily mean it has to be sort of, it has to sort of it has to be high art or something. It has to be sort of in this sort of art house world. It can just be, you know, it can be as whimsical as like Summer Holiday in Punjabi, you know, it can be, yeah. So, yeah, that's nice to know. That's nice to know that she wrote those lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah. And the tone of the film is, I think, crucial, really. The fact that that there are people, I mean, there are scenes of people threatening each other. Usually all the men, like all the male characters are just running around testosterone crazy and yelling at, and there is a version of this movie where it's really grim and serious, and it's all about the misery that these women are escaping from. And she's just not interested in that. And she'd actually, I looked up an old interview with her, and she said that Ken Loach was one of her favorite filmmakers and somebody she was trying to emulate in the realism of the culture, but not the tone.
Ah, interesting. Right. Yeah. But I think there's an overlap there with Clio, maybe in her latest sort of thing that she's with the Ali and Ava. And if you look at sort of the social realism tradition, that there is, it can be quite dour at times and a bit heavy-handed, and not heavy-handed, that's the wrong thing, because it's just reflecting the realities of British life, you know. But I think Gurinder's very good at it in Bhaji on the Beach, and I think Clio sort of, because it's arguable, some people sort of say that she's sort of taken up that kind of Ken Loach mantle in a way of like, well, if you look at her past films and that, but again, it's like, I think I appreciate the sort of lightness of touch you can have when you're dealing with quite heavy issues. And and just acting in Clio's films, it's sort of, I'm just trying to draw a bit of a parallel.
Sure,
being an actor in her films, and when you do that, when you have this lightness of touch with quite heavy-handed issues, it sort of allows for a sense of freedom in the playing of it, because you're not playing an idea.
Yeah,
because the idea would be to make it all a bit of a drudge, you know. The idea would be to really feel the sort of angst and pain of like the cultural tension. But actually, if you're trying to not make light of it but in a glib way, or make, you know, belittle it in any way, but do what people normally do in the face of adversity, and which is, you know, maybe crack a well-timed joke at the right time, or try and have a laugh, you know, as best you can. And once you do that, act anyway. To act that stuff means that you've got a sense of freedom in it, because you're kind of, there's no authority over that. It's, you know, there is an authority in like making stuff like real and you know, sort of, you know, but then it's, I don't know. Yeah, I do appreciate the lightness of touch when it comes to heavy issues.
I think, well, and certainly with films like Ali and Eva, and even The Selfish Giant, which is as grim as it gets, I think, as cinema. Yeah. I love the way she refuses to monotone them. Like they will not just be suffering. They're acutely aware. I mean, especially The Arbor too, and the way that she structures that film. These are movies that acknowledge that even miserable people are happy, right? Sometimes, because
yeah.
the instinct is to, exactly as you say, you just reach for the light. You reach for the
Right.
lightness. And the Ken Loach oeuvre has, I think, recently sort of become much more, how can I put this without, I don't mean to insult him, but he certainly, his last decade of work at least, suggests to me that he's worried people will miss the message. And so, he's steering everything.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Because he's a lovely man.
It's necessary. I mean, I would never want I feel we still need it,
Sure.
because the disparities and, for all the obvious reasons why Ken Loach makes his films, because there's work to be done, I suppose. So we need it. But by definition, that also means that we need, like how you put it really well, like, we need the films that are also trying to search for that light as well, trying to search for the hope and the light through that,
Mm-hmm.
And we do need both. We need to see films that reflect society as it is, because sometimes the grim realities are the only thing that can sort of mobilize people into action. And, we also need the other, some people sort of are mobilized into action because they are, riding a wave of hope and light. And I think we definitely need both. I think I'm more in this sort of camp of going for one rather than the other now. I think when I was younger, I think there was a tendency to sort of, I had like a actor studio sort of background, so a bit of a methody background. So there was a tendency to sort of feel all of it all at once, and just to show that, I don't know. And now, I don't know, being older and with kids and everything, I think it's important to end on quite hopeful sort of, for me anyway. The idea is to sort of search for that hope a little bit in amongst all the stuff to feel hopeless about, maybe.
Yeah. And the central, I promise we'll get back to Bhaji on the Beach, but the central conflict of Ali and Eva is between someone who's offering something and someone who isn't sure she can take it. Watching Ali, watching your performance is just, there's this, and it's, again, I can't say I know Clio Barnard at all, really. We've met a few times and she's done the podcast, and I'm with her the whole way as an artist. I think she's remarkable. But I recognize this thing that she has where your performance is structured within the film as someone who really, really wants this thing to happen and is also terrified of it because he's just sort of resisting overdoing it. He doesn't want to frighten this woman off. Like this, there's this fascination and hesitation that's mixed in your performance, and there are cuts where it's just sort of right there in his eyes, and then it goes away again because he's performing for Eva, and you never see this. Like, you just don't see, and the backgrounds of the characters are essential to all of that, and his hesitations and her resistance, and the way that they communicate and connect is so specific in its cultural specificity.
Yes,
but it's all about need, like the need to connect, and of course, seeing this in the middle of a pandemic was really, really powerful.
Yes, yeah. It does sort of speak to that, I think. And, when I was a bit younger, I used to sort of pay lip service to the idea of, this, like, the sort of power of connection with other people, the idea that it can, it can transcend a lot of divisive sort of, divisions. But the more and more, I'm, doing hopefully the work that I'm doing, the more and more I believe it as a sort of motivating factor of, like, making the films that I want to make, or making the work that I want to make. Because I really believe in it now more than ever. Like, this idea that people, once they have a connection with someone, it's really hard to reverse that. It's really hard to sort of go, it's beyond you, really. And I think that's where the film, for me, ends. It's like there's something that is really difficult to articulate that's going on with these two characters, but in the good way that pure cinema does, it makes it a felt experience for both the audience and the two characters. It makes it a thing of going, oh, they're changed now. Something's happened, they're connected and they're changed. And I just find that such a potent way of making films, and such a potent thing of like, I love it when I see it in films as well, and Clio's to sort of mastered that, because again, like coming back to that thing, she does it with the lightest of touches. She's not kind of trying to guide the story. She's not sort of puppeteering us as audience or the characters in a way to sort of push the buttons in the right way. She's just actually stepping foot into the mystery of what that is and discovering with us, I always joke with her because there's sometimes when we're sort of on set and I'm like, what do I do here? And like sometimes she'll go, oh, I don't know, the traditional sort of directing thing is like, well, give me a bit of direction, but she's honestly a true artist in that sense, in the sense that she's not gonna mess about with a platter, or with an easy direction. She's just going, well, I'm not sure. What I get from that is like, I'm not sure and you're not sure, but you're not alone in the discovery of what that is, and
yeah.
I'm just so in awe of her and just so happy like I was part of the film, It's just, yeah.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to tell you about the new Shiny Things newsletter, my weekly dispatch about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming thing. This week, I wrote about Jordan Peele's Nope, the 4K edition of Everything Everywhere All at Once, and the Criterion release of Carl Franklin's Devil in a Blue Dress. There's also a contest. Subscribe for the price of a latte at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Twitter account. It's me, writing about movies again. Come check it out. I mean, it sort of creates a method atmosphere anyway, doesn't it? If she's trusting you to find that moment.
Right. It creates a method atmosphere, but it also allows for us to not define a process. You know what I mean? Like there's this sort of tendency, but I think we're sort of just in a space now when it comes to making films and actors and stuff like that you magpie a lot of things. Like there is life imitating art, and there's some moments in the film that feel more real than reality itself, and then there's other points which just kind of just really are so beautifully like a bit of visual poetry that are beyond the confines of social realism. They kind of just almost enter this kind of dreamscape, but that's the world that we're living in now. You can have it all in the one film. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be confined to calling yourself any particular type of actor just to get, you can, and even with the films, you don't have to be confined to this idea that it just has to work within the realms of social realism, whatever it can. We talked a lot about autofiction in literature.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about this as being biofiction, which is, and she says it sounds a lot like a washing up detergent. It's really funny. It's funny, but it is that, in literature and stuff, you can have like a novel, but you can also have sort of autofiction. You can have the hands, you can have the author's hand in the literature. And in the same way, I feel this film is for me. Like you can sort of, there's people in this film that are people from that area who are enacting actual things that have happened to them or did happen to them but that's also melded in with Clio's amazing ability to fictionalize stuff as well and make it sort of appealing for an audience. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on in it that I just feel like, if we were in a sort of like a university setting or lecture, there's a lot to sort of unpick and look at, and it's just I love being a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I always just, every time she makes a movie, it's a chance to disappear into it, to see what's going on in Bradford through her eyes, and how things are working. And I think each time they get a little bigger too. There's a little more community. There's a little more structure. The Selfish Giant is really only about a handful of characters, and Ellie and Ava is about an entire, well, it's two characters, but there's an entire community around them. And actually this deftly brings me back, not deftly at all, but it brings me back to Bhaji on the Beach, because you're seeing the reflection of a community. These are actors and they're playing roles, but the relationships and the dynamics are, as you said, instantly recognizable as authentic to anyone who's lived them. And I didn't realize Mira Sayal also wrote The Kumars at Number 42, which makes perfect sense to me because...
Yeah. I don't know if you remember Goodness Gracious Me, that was on TV.
Oh, I don't think that made it to Canada, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. So basically, there was a lot of firsts amongst that lot, and we had comedy, British sitcoms that were always sort of recognisable, and The Real McCoy was one of them, which was an all-black sitcom, and Goodness Gracious Me was an all-Asian sitcom. So it was Mira Sayal, her husband, I forget all their names, but she was a part of four people who were basically making comedy on TV for the first time. And again, Bhaji on the Beach feels like another one of these sort of firsts, these sort of things where, it never been done before. And it makes complete sense that she's always been that way, Mira Sayal. I remember she wrote a book called Anita and Me which was about her, and that got put on TV, and I had the pleasure of working with her as well. Oh. I think, on a comedy called Back to Life. And we found ourselves in a room just waiting to sort of do some scenes together. And it was such a pleasure just to sort of travel in her mind a little bit of like, well, where did it all start? And how did you feel when you were doing this? And there was nobody else doing it like you at the time. And And now her daughter is actually quite high up in a theatre in the UK called the Royal Court. And she's sort of, puts plays, she produces plays there, sort of thing. So it's, she's great. She's great writer, great person.
And obviously keenly observant. I mean, I'm getting that feeling from Bhaji.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And also not and unwilling to take the edges away of things, like, and also doing that thing which is really hard to do, sort of presenting the drama with the comedy at the same time. Not sort of leaning too much one way or the other, just presenting both as being a reality of how people live their lives.
Yeah. I mean, I was really struck in Bhaji by the fact that almost nothing is resolved. A couple of key relationships are, but these generational problems, they're not going to be solved on a bus trip.
No.
It's the illusion, right, of every older generation just thinks if they can sit the younger generation down for an hour and tell them.
Yeah.
And that's like, we're seeing that playing out now in every political stream, every conversation that's happening about how you kids today don't know. Like it never goes away. And I'm terrified that now in my 50s, I'm going to become that person.
Yeah.
But it's so great to see the conversations that, as you say, were happening in everyone's homes on a screen somewhere. My grandparents were always horrified whenever somebody made a movie where Jewish people either were not the victims, like the Holocaust film where the Jews were clearly being, I don't even know how, being oppressed, I suppose, because that's part of the narrative that goes all the way back to Exodus.
Yes.
Or unambiguous heroes like doctors or lawyers fighting for another character. Any kind of blurring of that, any sense that these people might also be fallible human beings, they were horrified. My parents are okay with it, and I'm just like, please show them as messy as possible. We need that. Although Seinfeld is sort of the breaking point for me, because that's just a form of Judaism that makes my skin crawl. Just like
Yeah.
the overplaying of neurosis. I think Woody Allen, even though now it's highly problematic to even discuss his films,
Yes.
did a lot to do that and sort of entrench that vision
Yes.
of Jewish people as like the charming intellectuals who will also not be threatening.
Right. Yeah.
Which is part of it, right? Like when you're an assimilated artist, you're trying to say, hey, we're just like you and also safe. But by excluding most white characters and providing an exclusive lens on the South Asian principles and Bhaji, we're denied that, right? Because they can yell at each other. They can be angry with each other. They can show these dimensions.
Yeah. But also the conversation, I think, starts there. I think we're sort of entering a space now where I think if you see somebody on screen who is has a sort of defined cultural heritage, if they're sort of an Asian person portrayed on TV or film, or a Jewish person portrayed on TV or film, the sort of, well, anyway, definitely with British Asians, there's sometimes a criticism that comes in where you can have a brown guy who's playing a particular role and his name is, or not particularly Indian or Pakistani, or a name that would come from the Indian subcontinent, right?
Sure,
so it's sort of like a Roy or a Trevor or whatever, a sort of more white name. So there's criticism there is like, also we're sort of in a spot now where we can have colorblind casting, but it's almost like a big part of where that character is from is denied in pursuit of being not looking at race or whatever. But sure. I sort of feel now, and this, I don't know if this is like pushing the conversation a bit too far, but in the same way that I feel hopeful about Clio's films, I feel hopeful about the idea that we can have it all, really. I mean, that sounds strange, but we're now in a sort of filmic terrain or TV terrain, or what, even in plays and literature, I suppose, as well. The idea that, and even the genres of literature, like I was saying, there's autofiction and there's memoir, and sometimes you just mash all that stuff together. There's a way in which you can have it all now, and you don't have to leave anyone on the sidelines who's quick to criticize about a particular portrayal of a character in a particular way. You just have to be really good at making the stuff. You just got to be really good at doing it in a way that's really that you just don't leave. Yeah, you just don't leave anybody on the sidelines.
Yeah.
That's all that to say. I think we are now in a spot where we can. Feels like we have the ability. Our ambition is allowing us to do more than we thought we could. And I'm really excited about that. Only because it means that. Because I mean, maybe an example of that is I'm just working. Maybe an example of that is I'm doing really interesting and varied works. That something must be going right in regards to the thing that I'm just talking about not very well, but
it's absolutely what you're experiencing, right? You're talking about it just fine. I've really enjoyed your work all along. I was delighted to see the guy from Four Lions show up as Lestrade. Sure. Right. In Enola Holmes. Within 10 years, that's your early roles were very much stereotypical, but you were working within them to do something different.
Yeah.
But if Morris hadn't made Four Lions, which is now this incredible launching pad for everyone in it, is somebody who I'm just delighted to see every time they show up and do things. Novak is here in Toronto shooting What We Do in the Shadows all the time.
And Riz is like next level at the moment.
Massive,
producing and directing, and it was a real thing. I think maybe because he instilled the idea that you can do it. It's just, can you do it? If you're gonna, and I think that's that's a little bit of what I'm trying to say at the moment. What I'm trying, I suppose, is if your ambition is to bring everyone along to the party, then and not leave anyone on the sidelines, really, then we're more in a position where we can do it now than we ever have been. Because, yeah, I think we're just sort of more aware and open to more people and things. And I'm working with a young guy at the moment. He's a young fella from Nottingham, and he's like 26 or 27. And I'm just bowled over by the level of sensitivity he has with making films. It's like, I mean, I don't know why it should surprise. Maybe it shouldn't. I mean, 27 is still quite old. It's not, he's not a kid, but I'm still thinking to myself, wow, you've been exposed to so much already. And like, I defer to his a bit, and I'm just so excited about what he's going to do and what he's going to create. And I think that's how I sort of feel about films in general. We're just in a spot now where we can make it all work if we want, I think we really can. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to not just casting, but trusting, right? Like knowing that people can deliver and seeing, and as a result, you're seeing an actor as someone who is capable of range rather than capable of playing one part. I mean, it's the knock-on effect, right? And it's because we've seen, ideally, it'll be because the filmmaker has seen those actors in other things where they've gone bigger or wider or surprised them.
Yes.
But there is this legacy of celebrating actors, and especially people of color, who turn out to have only been cast in one thing for their entire career, right? Like Sidney Poitier had to push for years to do something that wasn't an angry, noble black hero.
Right.
And you look back and you see all the ground he broke and all the work he did, but the studios would only let him do that one role. He was doing it all outside the lines. He was doing everything else in addition to his career to make himself have range, to display the things he could do. Yeah. And then there's Denzel Washington, who immediately, like, he starts as this romantic lead sort of on, or it was part of an ensemble, but on the show St. Elsewhere in NBC, they cast him as a guy who could be sexy. Like, this is 1983, I think. And
with like Mississippi Masala sort of time.
That's 10 years later.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Right.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. And I just re-encountered that because we screened a 4K restoration of Mississippi Masala last month, and Mira Nair came in to introduce it, and we chatted a bit. She just offhandedly said, like, there was no other person to cast. He was the handsomest, sexiest, funniest. You want him in your movie.
Yes.
And like, it's incidental to her that this is a film about multiple ethnicities juggling for time and space, and in a film, like, it's just the way the movie was made. And this is right around the same time as Bhaji on the Beach.
True. Yes.
But they're sort of echoing each other. But Mississippi Masala is very much about the Black/South Asian relationship being challenged, where it's an element of Bhaji.
Yes, you're right.
And part of the larger chorus. I'm just wondering if it's because of the cultural differences, but it's really remarkable to see it. It was like it was in the air. It was all happening right then.
Yeah, you're right. It was in the air, and it was sort of happening at a time where I think there was an appetite for, definitely in the UK, where there was like a big sort of 80s experimental film tradition. You had Derek Jarman sort of, and then sort of movement of film in that sort of vein. So, and the ability to see that stuff on TV, you could have probably seen some Derek Jarman stuff on TV or some more experimental stuff. So people's, I don't know, it was almost like people were all right at being slightly challenged by what they were watching a little bit, and that allowed for I think Gurinder for Bhaji on the Beach, and definitely for like My Beautiful Laundrette, and Buddha of Suburbia was another one that was like an episodic TV, that to allow that to sort of be seen in a way, there was like, and it wasn't, and maybe more so like Buddha of Suburbia and My Beautiful Laundrette, because those films maybe were the narrative thrust of them was these unique characters that just so happen to be Asian, right? They were sort of like, they were quite unique characters that you would see, but they weren't sort of pushing an idea of like a stereotype at all, or weren't even, they were nowhere near that, with what Hanif Qureshi was writing. It was all very kind of literary. It was the first time you were seeing these really sort of fully rounded characters. But yeah, all that to say, I think that was the start. That's the start of the conversation of like saying there's complexity within the thing that you feel as though you understand very well, and now we're in a spot where that sort of that ability to sort of understand nuance and complication within characters, allows for us to broaden our understanding of it. So, coming back to the original point, there's less excuse to leave anybody behind anymore. You know what I mean? There's less excuse for a Twitter comment about somebody having a gripe about something that's, that feels misrepresents a particular lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to make everybody happy, but we're in a position now where we can make most people happy most of the time, I think. And I think that's where Clio was coming from as well, in that sort of social realism sort of tradition. It was like the idea of the pursuit of emotional truth was almost this quite crystallized, focused thing, one thing, one pursuit. It was very singular in its pursuit. And I think what Clio's taught me is that you can have that singularity in your pursuit, but in that you can also universalize an experience that suddenly, you're looking at these two middle-aged people falling in love with each other, but really you're looking at the power of love, and that suddenly becomes way broader than, somebody, a white woman who lives in a predominantly white area in Bradford, or an Asian man who lives in a predominantly Asian area in Bradford. It becomes about something bigger, and yeah. And I feel like if you look at Twitter, you look at criticism, you don't really find much criticism about it, about depicting each one of those characters' cultures in a truthful way, because they kind of because in pursuit of just what Clive did, it would just make that not important for a little while.
Yeah,
just a small amount of time, so you can not get angry about something. You know what I mean? Just for maybe an hour and a bit or whatever.
Oh, that's all I ever ask from cinema.
Yeah. Just to put your critic pen down for a little bit, just for a bit. But yeah, I don't know why. I just keep on going back to that idea that we can take everyone along with us. There doesn't have to be anybody left behind really anymore. But maybe, well, you try anyway.
Yeah. And now someone will see this and see you as a romantic lead and think, oh yeah, I can do that. I can make that happen, or I can play that part, or there's potential. There's a possibility.
Sure. Yeah. But more so me, weirdly, the sort of weird irony is that, and it doesn't have to be traditional. It's like a traditional sort of romantic lead or whatever that means. I don't understand. It can be this kind of, like how people are, like if you're just reflecting people muddying their way through life, trying to cobble together some kind of connection with people, Yeah, there's lots of versions of what that idea is, a romantic lead. And, I feel comfortable it being a sort of bearded Asian guy from Bradford, as opposed to like, somebody riding a horse with a ruffle or something. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
Ruffles are weird anyway. I mean, I think
that's
we can leave those behind.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they are strange. Yeah.
My thanks to Adeel Akhtar, whose new film Ali and Ava opens across Canada this Friday. In Toronto, you'll find it at the TIFF Bell Lightbox. Thanks also to Angie Power. She knows what she did. You can find Adeel on Twitter at Adeel Akhtar 1234, ADEELAKHTAR 1234. And though Bhaji on the Beach is currently out of print on DVD, those discs are still floating around on Amazon and eBay and pretty much wherever. It's also available to rent or buy on Amazon in the US, on Apple TV in Ireland, and on Amazon, the BFI player, and BritBox in the UK. VPNs are amazing, by the way. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the podcast is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 46 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next time.